All right, here we are. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. It's October 21st, and we are doing Insight Policing live stream Uncut. My name is Dr. Megan Price. I direct the Center for Applied Insight Conflict Resolution and train Insight Policing, strategic communication, conflict resolution skills for officers. We are here with our regular guests, Mike Delaney and Andre Brooks, co-trainers for Insight Policing. Want to say a little hello, Mike?
Hello, guys. How you guys doing today? Hope everyone is safe.
Andre?
Good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you could join us today.
So, of course, as you know, both Andre and Mike have over 30 years of law enforcement experience as investigators and working with the community. But today we have a very special guest, Chief James Small from Palmyra, Wisconsin. James, we are so grateful to have you with us. As you know, Insight Policing is about engaging productively with the community, right? Even in the face of conflict, in the face of resistance, aggression, non-compliance. It's a skill set that uses targeted, specialized questions, really, that honor the citizen by getting strategically curious about why they're upset or what they're concerned is going to happen that's leading them to be angry or to not comply or to otherwise engage in behavior that's challenging to the officer. So when an officer gets to the bottom of it, right, of that behavior and really hears where the citizen is coming from, it interrupts escalation and centers the citizen who the officer is ultimately there to help. So this, can change dynamics and build trust. And it's what the officer can do to support community in an enforcement situation, even when it's hard and it feels like it's going down kind of the wrong road. So James, what you bring to this is the organizational dimension with your island framework, which we're really excited to hear about. The premise being, and please add to this, that police departments or law enforcement agencies need to have a sound, supportive internal culture in order to support officers in their efforts to engage productively and peacefully with the community. And that is really important so that they can then build that trust, right? Which is so important for safety and connection. So community trust often hinges on organizational trust and that connection that officers have with the agency who they serve for. So talk to us about the importance of organizational culture in policing and then the island framework that you've developed to help other chiefs and leaders build the kind of internal culture that supports officers and by extension, the community.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a really key point there with your work that you do with your organization on taking these a different, maybe not as confrontational approach to resolving the problems out in the community and building those, having those touches and building those relationships. My thought on that is that if the internal agency's culture is not allowing for things like that internally, it's not going to happen externally as well. It's going to be faked. There's going to be inconsistencies between what the officer is experiencing in their work versus what they're trying to accomplish on the street. And one of the things that we see in a lot of the research on agencies is that the number one stressor for the individual officer is the internal workplace culture, the internal workplace politics. And I think we can all relate to that as being the part that we don't like the most about our jobs. Going out and doing things on the street as a police officer is pretty fun most of the time. You get to go out, you drive around, you see people, you go to some calls, you fix some problems, or at least temporarily resolve them until you're there again a week later, trying to resolve them again, right? But overall, the basic framework of going out and being a police officer isn't terrible. It's a pretty purposeful job, but the internal culture makes it less purposeful. And I think that's why people don't stay in until retirement, why we see people move on to other jobs. We see people leave from one agency to the next agency to the next agency and so on, trying to find that purpose within their workplace. So
So wait, James, can I pause you right there? Because I think that's a really important point. And I'd love to hear, Mike, from you, how that resonates in your, time in law enforcement.
Well, James, you hit the nail on the head there. I think my main takeaway was we can't fake it, and because our community understands what's going on. They're smart, they're intelligent, and they know when we're trying to fake it. But I think that's a great point because, when you're feeling good at the workplace and you're getting along, obviously everybody won't be holding hands and kissing babies all the time. We get that. But if there's a positive relationship and a positive environment in the office, in the workplace, in the roll calls, then officers are able and investigators are able to extend that to the community. And, it makes it for a nice, wholesome relationship. So those are great points there, James.
Yeah, so our approach is we're very strategic in our hiring, first of all. So we're bringing in the right people that fit our model, because somebody that comes in that just wants to go out and pound their fist on the table, write 100 tickets a day and things like that aren't a good fit for our model and the engagement that we have with our community. So our targeted employee is a kind, compassionate problem solver. So we need to be able to demonstrate that they're nice, they care about what they're doing, and that when they go out on calls, they're going to make decisions that make the situation better. They solve the problem. So kind, compassionate problem solver. And we've designed our selection process around finding those people in our applicant pool and who can we demonstrate best fits that mold. Because everybody that's applying for our agency wants to work for our agency. That's why they're applying. They're interested in that job. So we don't need to really vet that part out so much. But those are traits that I can't teach. I can't teach you to be nice to everybody all the time. And I can't teach you to keep yourself engaged and care about what you're doing. And I can't teach you to want to be a decision maker, because that's what we do as law enforcement officers. Our job is to go out and make decisions that make things better. We need to look at it that way when we're talking about problem solving. So then when they are hired, they come into a framework that we call building an island. So let's think of our organizations as these isolated groups that largely influenced by the people that are within the group. So like an island. So think of Australia breaking off from landmass millions of years ago and evolving on its own without any outside influence. That's an island. And I think all of our agencies are, whether we want to admit it or not, we all have a tendency to be isolated. We're silos and we're islands. So let's just acknowledge that and embrace it and look at how do we manage that within that group. So I'm using island as an acronym. So the first part of it is inclusion. So making sure that everybody's included in everything and getting rid of some of the in-groups and the out-groups and the cliques and the things that are destructive within the group, because you'll see people isolate themselves, especially as things aren't going well. You'll see them kind of become the outcast or the out-group or so on. Those people need to be brought back in, and everybody needs to be part of that and take responsibility as an employee at making this inclusion be a thing. Mm-hmm. The second part is safety. So civility and respect. So it's safe to be in the workplace. So you don't have the blindsiding, the backstabbing, the intentional embarrassing of each other, those kind of things, the bullying that you see happen at time, hazing and stuff like that. That's not acceptable. We're working in a workplace. People need to be able to know that they can come and be treated with dignity and respect in the workplace. And that needs to be done by everybody and be the expectation. So it's safe. Next part is having laughs. It still needs to be fun, right? So one of the things our officers will do when they're patrolling, they'll get out of the car a lot. Hey, the kids are out playing basketball, so now they're playing basketball. And then inevitably a video of them playing basketball will show up somewhere in social media, which then we'll put in our own social media. And there's good reason why our officers are not professional athletes, right? When you got the 10-year-olds on the basketball court whooping them, there's a reason. But it's fun, and it helps reduce the stress to the officer too. And they're making those positive touches, because it's not just that. If they stop at the Little League game and they pitch for the kids for a while, that touch isn't just with those kids, it's with all the parents in the stands too. So they've had a very, very positive touch with the community there on lots of people in a really short period of time, really. And it didn't cost us anything. You know, what were they going to be doing in that 20 minutes? A traffic stop? You know, I mean, that's the reality of it, is these touches are worth a lot more than $100 speeding ticket. The next part to it is developing a culture of authentic accountability so that the person feels it in them and making it be part of them. So it's not that they're engaging in behaviors because if you don't do this, you're going to be punished. They're doing it because it has purpose and it's moving forward. So the way that we do that, I use a just culture methodology from a disciplinary perspective. So if something happens that shouldn't have happened or we perceive shouldn't have happened, it's looked at from the perspective of what does the organization own? What do I own as the leader? And then what part of the situation does the person own? And is it something where they just genuinely made a mistake? You know, we go into highly dynamic situations all the time and have to make decisions with very little information. And sometimes those decisions aren't right in the end. In a situation like that, that's the officer trying to do the right thing. That's not a punishment issue. That's not a discipline issue. That's maybe a training issue, but it's not something that should be a negative, you know, versus an off-duty conduct issue where a person did something that's illegal. That's being reckless. That's a punishment issue. So looking at kind of from that perspective, but you'll see in agencies, a lot of them will just paper the people into oblivion. You know, they get a warning for this and they got wrote up for this. And all it is negative, 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 negative. We need to grow people. We can't grow them from the negative. They're having them avoid the stick isn't the same as chasing the carrot. Yep. And we really need to approach it from that perspective if we want to have a positive atmosphere. The next part is nourishment. So what are we doing with wellness and what are we doing with our own development? So are we developing individual development plans with the staff? Are we working on wellness? Is EAP an okay thing to have in your agency? So one of the things is we're very open with that. Our EAP providers come in and do meetings with our staff about what services are available. How do they know when they need services and so on? And we're very open about it. It's not a thing where it's just a poster on the wall with a phone number to call. So it takes a little bit of work, but at the same time, it makes it an okay thing to do, because I think that's some place that we suffer in the industry just in general, that people don't feel like it's okay to call EAP when they need it. And they'll suffer and their performance suffers and they end up dragging down other people around them and so on. And we see a lot of negative consequences from that. And the last part is the direction. So how are we communicating? How are we messaging our stuff to each other? And where are we going with that? What's the direction we're taking in general? When I think of messaging, I think of, you know, do you tell the football player to not fumble or do you tell him to score a touchdown? And how are we framing that message? Because they're completely different messages. If you tell somebody not to fumble, they're not going to fumble, right? They're going to be so conservative that they'll never fumble, but they'll probably never score a touchdown. The guy scoring the touchdown might fumble once in a while, but then he's going to get back up and score a touchdown. So how are we putting all these things together? So what I've done is developed a training program, and I work with other agencies on this too, and I've got a training for leaders that talks about how you're hiring people, how are you identifying the kind, compassionate problem solver and so on. And then how are we leading the agency using these island concepts? So how do we build this island that people want to be part of? Because the outcomes of it is the retention's better. Our retention is exceptional at our agency right now compared to what it was prior to maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We're bringing people in and they're choosing to stay, and we pay really bad. So you know, and I can say that we're the lowest paying agency in the southern half of Wisconsin for full-time staff. And our staff also do fire and EMS response too, as part of their duties. So we put a lot of responsibility on them. We pay them very low, but we created a workplace that they can't beat, and they all know it. Yeah. So they choose to stay. And that's in the face of looking at agencies where they could easily go in one day make $20,000 a year more than what they make now, but they're choosing to come back each day. The other part is I have a training for the individual employees too, so that you teach employees how to engage in behaviors that build the different parts of the island too. And they don't need to all do it all the time. You need some of them to do it most of the time, and it just builds that culture. Because we need to get rid of this backbiting culture that's out there that's just so negative and really drags on the staff. And what we've seen happen with it is we've seen just exceptionally good outcomes at the street level with the citizens. The citizens strongly support our agency, whether it's the residents of the community, the business owners, the owners of the taverns. Generally, there's kind of an antagonistic relationship between tavern owners and law enforcement. We don't have that at all. They'll come up and talk to me on the street. One of the things I just heard from one of them, hey, we haven't had your guys in the bar in a couple weeks. You think you can have them come through sometime when they're out again? They want us to be in there because we have these positive contacts with the people when we're in there. So we're not in there cracking skulls. We're in if I go and do a bar check myself, oh, the chief's here. 2 hours later, I'm on to the next one because everybody wants to talk to you because they trust you. So my experience in the past with other agencies, when I walk into a tavern and half the people would get up and go out the other door and be gone. And now it's, no, we want to talk to you because you're not here to hassle me. You're here to seeing what's going on.
Hey, Chief, let me ask, where do I submit my resume for that?
I'll give you my email when we're done. Every officer that we have on our roster right now came from another agency. They've all worked for other places and came to us. So, and I think that speaks of what our reputation has gotten to be in the region, that we're a place that you can come to if you want to do policing and you want to like it and you don't care how much you're making. This is a place. This is a place that you can do that.
So one
yeah,
thing
we haven't.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Oh, one thing that I really love about what you're talking about, James, is that, really you're living positive conflict engagement, within your organization. The whole idea that mistakes happen, we learn from them. I mean, we could also talk about this as an organizational growth mindset, right? So you're really encouraging your officers to do their best, to try hard, and that it's okay to fail because it's something that you can learn from, not to be punished for necessarily. And I think that's a really positive outlook. And clearly, you're having excellent outcomes in terms of positive engagement with the community, even crime.
Yes, outcomes. And part of what this is, though, if you're expecting someone to be a decision maker, part of decision making is risk taking. Because if they're given freedom to make decisions and don't have to just come and ask every time, they might not make the right one. So that's where that just culture really becomes critical to this, because you have to have, for our system to work, they have to make decisions. They have to, because we're expecting them to create outcomes. We're not just expecting them, oh, you saw somebody speeding, stop them, write a ticket, done. That kind of model. That's your traditional police model, right? Saw a bad thing, arrested person, went to jail, the end. We're expecting them to take things further than that. And let's look into what's going on here. Is there a bigger picture issue that we need to be dealing with and so on, and then create a solution and implement a solution and execute it. So if we're not open to the idea that sometimes there might be mistakes and it's a learning thing and maybe we'll all learn from it, something from it, that's not going to work. We need people that are going to be out there and they're comfortable enough to make a mistake that they'll take a little bit of risk. Mm-hmm. But it's worked really well. And the staff likes, people like being able to make decisions. They like being able to go out and see, hey, we were having this really serious problem in the community, and then we did this, and this, and now it's better and it's gone. Or they see the person.
It's empowering. You're letting people take the lead, and that makes us feel good as human beings.
Yes.
And I tell you, James, have you been able to actually speak to the police academies there in your area? And
I haven't done the academies. I taught a section of this to the new chief certification class through Department of Justice. They do that once a year with all the new chiefs come through that have been appointed in the previous year. So I taught it this year was the first time with them. And I've been doing sections of it around. We've had a lot of attention from the fire departments too. The fire departments have similar cultural issues and similar retention issues and things like that. So there's a lot of parallels between EMS, fire, and law enforcement on some of the problems that you're seeing, and this is being seen as a means of addressing those too.
I think, James, I'm gonna tell you that's an excellent model, because policing today is screaming for change like that. You know, it's trying to get away from our basic way of thinking and training officers. And I think that you touch on a lot of points, especially the wellness as well, to address that, because I mean, you know, alcoholism, mental health issues, all those things are very key in, you know, how you go out and perform your job. And if you're not up to the best of your ability, and if you're not hiring the best people to do this job, you're going to continue to have the issues that have gotten most big city police departments to where we're at today. So, I mean, I commend you on your efforts, because that is a great model. And I hope that, you know, you kind of broaden that and expand that to maybe some of these huge cities and police departments to look at something like that, because I mean, they really need to kind of model what they're doing to make change to win back the community, I think.
I mean, it's a really good point that you bring up too, Andre. And I bet, James, that you've gotten this a lot. You know, Palmyra isn't a large city. You know, there are different types of crime. How could this work in a city or in a context that is so much different from Palmyra? And Andre, I think what you're speaking to is that this would work and it would be super beneficial. But how do you respond to those kinds of critiques?
Yeah, and I think it would. I think it's applicable everywhere. I think every contact is a touch between one person and another person. And we need to stop looking at it as this big anonymous, you know, let's say you have the city of 1 million citizens, but ultimately that police contact is this officer with one person or maybe two people, but it's a very personal experience. So whether it's in our community where it's easy for us to go out and know the several thousand people in our community and know who the different people are and maybe know who the people that our problems are rather intimately. But think about that. My touch today with this person is going to influence the touch that my partner has tomorrow with that person, and so on. And think of it as a continuum or a chain of touches as we build these relationships with people, and stop looking at it as being this anonymous type thing. You know, I see in some larger agencies where the officers are allowed to wear just a number on their name tag rather than being a person. From my perspective, I don't think that's good. I understand why they might want to do it for safety reasons and things like that, but we're appointing a person with this authority. They're becoming a public official to be able to take the government's authority out to the streets and impose the government's will on people. That's a personal thing. I picked this person and appointed them, and they took an oath to do that. So I think when we start looking at ourselves as officer versus person, we need to be that person having that touch. And it's about being human. It's about taking a human perspective to this whole thing. And I know that people would disagree with that and say it's not safe and so on. And I'm sure there's ways to work with that too, to get back to being that, hey, I'm James. And that's how I introduce myself on traffic stops when I go out and do a stop. Hey, I'm James from the police department. Is there any reason why you're going so fast today? You know, and you end up, it de-escalates everything down. I'm a person, they're a person. We talk to each other with first names, and then they go on with whatever took place on that, whatever the enforcement action was. Yeah. But you have this very personal touch. And when we've taken that away, maybe from the officer perspective, the officer doesn't feel like it's a personal touch. That person still feels like it's a personal touch on the other end. So how are we making this consistent? And it's the same idea as trying to have your inside workplace consistent with what you expect the officer to be doing on the street level too. So how are we getting back to some of this consistency in that message across the board?
Really aligning the humanity of the organization and the humanity of the community. And
our experience has been too, our crime has gone down drastically since we implemented this. At one point, we had been down in a 5-year period. We had reduced our property crimes that were down like 87%. Like it's like it feels fake when you see the numbers. I had actually requested an audit, a secondary audit from the Crime Information Bureau to verify that our data was correct, because it's like you can't reduce crime by 90%, right? It's not possible. But what we had is our crime rate initially was over twice the state average for property crimes, but we had this very abrasive policing style. And there's some studies out there that suggest that bad policing actually increases crime more than no policing. So what I wondered was what was being experienced as far as the crime was the abrasive policing style that was very retaliatory, very in your face, and disrespectful to people. Was that actually encouraging people to go out and commit more property crimes versus being treated with respect and dignity, where now you have someone who can act as your role model, and now you want to please your role models and your mentors, and now you're not going to engage in some of those behaviors because you know this person and you respect them, and they're saying, hey, don't do that. Mm-hmm. So I wondered why that is, but that was one of the side effects. We didn't attack the crime issue directly straight on, like in a traditional sense, but we've experienced a drastic reduction in crime, and the community will tell you that. The community is very aware that their cars aren't being broken into anymore, and if they forget their garage door up during the night, they probably still have their bikes the next day, and things like that, where that wasn't the case 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I think that you're definitely onto something. And it's tough right now because there's this tradition of punishment is what achieves results, when really, when we look into the data and, check in with ourselves, it's that connection, it's that trust, it's that respect. And so what you're building really does play on where we need to go, in policing and in our interactions, I think, with each other more generally. So I think we've come to our time. I would love to talk more about this, and about the idea of safety and where it actually comes from, and the alignment. All of these things are really interesting. So I want to thank you for your time and for joining us. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Andre. And we will see you next week. Same time, same place.
All right, be safe.
Thank you.
All right.